The lights were loud, the makeup unforgettable, and the guitars, pure fire. But behind the thunder and fame of Kessis was a story few ever truly saw, one of genius, tension, and brotherhood stretched to its limit. When Ace Frehley died, the rock world held its breath. Tributes poured in, guitars wailed in his honor, but Paul Stanley, his longtime bandmate and friend, said nothing. For days silence. Then at last he spoke, and what he said didn't just honor a fallen bandmate, it cracked open decades of pain, pride, and unfinished history. This isn't just the story of a rock icon's final days. It's the raw, untold saga of friendship, fallout, and the spaceman who never stopped reaching for the stars. When news of Ace Frehley's death broke, the rock world fell into silence. Fans across generations flooded social media with shock and sorrow. All around the globe, guitarists paid tribute with blistering renditions of Shock Me and Rocket Ride, honoring the man whose playing could make a guitar sound like lightning. But as the tributes poured in, one voice remained conspicuously quiet: Paul Stanley. For decades, Paul wasn't just Ace's bandmate in Kessis, he was his musical mirror, the Starchild and the Spaceman, two halves of the same legend. And yet Paul said nothing, no tweet, no statement, not even a whisper. His silence stretched on, first a few days, leaving fans to wonder, was this grief or something deeper? Was Paul still wrestling with the scars of a complicated past? Then, at last, he spoke, joined by the bandmate who had been there from the start. In a rare and emotional joint statement, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons broke their silence. Ace was an essential and irreplaceable rock soldier during some of the most formative and foundational chapters of Kessis. His style, his sound, and his spirit helped shape everything we became. He was our brother, our bandmate, and our friend. Today, we remember the laughter, the music, and the fire that only he could bring. Peter Criss, the original drummer who'd stood beside them from the earliest club gigs to packed arenas, added his own tribute. Ace influenced and touched the hearts of millions. His guitar sang like no one else's. He was one of a kind. For longtime fans, those words hit like a final chord to a 50-year song. Beautiful, broken, and filled with history. Paul and Ace's relationship had always been complex, a cocktail of admiration, conflict, and unspoken loyalty. They were never full-on enemies, but rarely fully aligned. From the start, their personalities clashed. Paul was meticulous, driven by perfection, obsessed with precision and control. Every note had to land exactly right. Ace was the opposite, instinctual, chaotic, and impulsively brilliant. He played with feel, not formula. That creative tension helped define Kessis' early sound. But it also fueled friction. As the band rocketed to fame in the late 70s, Paul and Gene Simmons began to take over the band's direction, handling most of the songwriting, production, and business moves. Ace felt sidelined. He wanted Kessis to stay raw, heavy, and real, while the band veered into spectacle and polish. Eventually, Ace admitted he felt like guest in his own band, watching decisions happen without him. Despite his genius, his input was often dismissed, was incredibly talented but unreliable. Ace, in turn, called Paul and Gene control freaks who stifled his creativity. And so, even before the music stopped, the distance had begun. Paul Stanley once admitted that Ace was incredibly talented but unreliable, while Ace fired back, calling Paul and Gene control freaks who smothered his creativity. By the late 1970s, Ace's struggles with alcohol and other substances had deepened the rift. His unpredictability, missing rehearsals, showing up late, sometimes vanishing entirely, made touring and recording a constant gamble. Paul, who lived by discipline, grew tired of the chaos. In a candid moment, he said Ace was a genius on stage and a ghost everywhere else. For Ace, the isolation only worsened. He later revealed he turned to substances to numb the feeling of being misunderstood. Their friendship didn't explode, it faded, quietly replaced by a cold professionalism, held together only by the music they once created as brothers. When Ace officially left Kessis in 1982, it felt less like a break-up and more like inevitability. The band moved on, but something essential had been lost. Even during the 1996 reunion tour, when the original four returned to the stage, the tension never truly left. Smiles masked old scars. Interviews turned into battlegrounds. Paul would criticize Ace's work ethic. Ace would slam Paul and Gene for obsession with control. The wounds, though aged, never healed. So when Paul finally broke his silence after Ace's death, it felt like more than tribute. It was the closing of a chapter that spanned decades of chaos, brilliance, and unresolved history. No matter the friction, their bond was always forged in the music, the one language they both understood, even when everything else fell apart. By the fall of 2025, Ace Frehley seemed to be in a good place. After years of turbulence, addiction, recoveries, breakups, and reunions, he had finally found a quieter rhythm. He was still recording, performing, and connecting with fans, flashing that familiar grin, the spark in his eyes seemingly untouched by time. But behind the scenes, his body had begun to feel the weight of years spent living loud. On September 25, 2025, tragedy struck. Ace was in his home studio in upstate New York when he suffered a sudden fall. At first, it didn't seem serious. Friends said he'd been in high spirits earlier that day, tossing around ideas for new projects, even talking about one last solo tour. But hours later, he collapsed again. This time from dizziness and disorientation, he was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors discovered something far more serious, a traumatic brain injury caused by the fall. He was quickly transferred to Morristown Medical Center in New Jersey for intensive care. News of the incident trickled out days later when his team quietly canceled his tour dates, citing unexpected medical issues. Fans hoped it was just another bump in the road. Ace had made so many comebacks, they believed he'd pull through again, but the updates stopped. And on October 16, 2025, the truth hit hard. Ace had been placed on life support. The damage was worse than anyone feared. He was suffering from severe brain bleeding, and his condition was rapidly declining. Doctors told the family recovery was unlikely. For over 2 weeks, his loved ones held vigil. His daughter Monique never left his side. His wife, Rachel, stayed quiet and close. His siblings came in from across the country. Together, they waited for a miracle, for movement, for anything. But the silence in the room said what words couldn't. Eventually, they made the hardest call of all. On a quiet afternoon, with the people who loved him most gathered around, life support was removed. A few hours later, Ace Frehley, guitarist, dreamer, rebel legend, passed away peacefully at 74. The news of Ace Frehley's passing in Morristown, New Jersey, in the early afternoon, sent shockwaves across the globe. His family released a poignant statement confirming his death. Ace passed away surrounded by those who loved him most. He was a father, a husband, a brother, and above all, a dreamer. His music and spirit will live on in every person who ever picked up a guitar because of him. Tributes immediately began to flood in. Fans placed candles and guitar picks outside the Kess Museum in Las Vegas, while guitar legends from Metallica, Foo Fighters, and Guns N' Roses hailed him as a true original. For those who grew up mesmerized by his ability to bend notes into celestial soundscapes, the loss was profoundly personal. In the days that followed, rock stations worldwide dedicated hours to his iconic music. Tracks like New York Groove, Shock Me, Cold Gin, and Rocket Ride once again dominated playlists, echoing their 1970s glory. Younger generations discovered his genius, while older fans listened with a mix of nostalgia and sorrow. His riffs, always larger than life, now carried a poignant finality. News outlets declared his death the end of an era. Yet, for those familiar with his journey, it was more the conclusion of a lifelong balancing act. A man who lived intensely, faced numerous setbacks, but always found his way back. Ace himself often joked about his brushes with death. In a Rolling Stone interview, he quipped, "I've cheated death more than I can count. But I guess when it's time, it's time. Until then, I'll keep playing." Ultimately, Ace Frehley embodied rock and roll until his last breath. He was imperfect, unpredictable, reckless, and stubborn, but always sincere. Paul Stanley, witnessing the world mourn his old friend, likely felt a sense of history's cyclical nature, the profound silence after the final note fades. Outside the Morristown Hospital, fans gathered with flowers, guitars, and cardboard lightning bolts. A small speaker softly played the opening riff of Shock Me, while others stood in quiet reflection. There were no pyrotechnics or spotlights, just heartfelt gratitude for the man who made music feel like outer space. Ace Frehley's story concluded as it began, with family, with sound, and with the unwavering spirit of a dreamer who refused to be ordinary. He once said he never wanted to grow up, never wanted to lose the electrifying sensation of the lights dimming and the first chord striking. In the hearts of those who loved him, he never did. To truly grasp Ace Frehley's appeal, one must look beyond the makeup, the riffs, and the chaos. He wasn't merely Kess's Spaceman, he was the very essence of its danger and rebellion. His guitar didn't just play notes, it communicated, slurring, screaming, and soaring, each solo defying gravity. In an era obsessed with image, Ace's raw authenticity made him relatable. From his mismatched sneakers at the 1973 audition, his unadorned realness was evident. He simply played without pretense. This unfiltered energy became integral to Case's identity. The raw crackle beneath the polish, the bolt of lightning animating their sound. While Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons built the empire, Ace provided its vital voltage. Songs like Shock Me, Cold Gin, and Parasite were not just fan favorites, they were foundational blueprints for hard rock. When he embarked on a solo career in 1978, expectations were low, yet Ace Frehley proved to be the strongest of the 4 individual Kess albums. His hit, New York Groove, perfectly encapsulated his essence, swagger, humor, and an unstoppable momentum. The world finally saw Ace's unfettered potential. However, freedom for Ace was a double-edged sword. Success brought temptations, leading to a slow descent that shadowed the remainder of his career. Despite his struggles with addiction, aborted tours, and near misses, his fans remained loyal. They saw a reflection of themselves in him, the dreamer who, though often unsteady, never ceased to reach for the stars. Ace embodied rock's most painful truth, that the same fire that fuels creation can also consume it. Even in his roughest years, there was something magnetic about him, that spark that said, "I'm still here." Behind his grin and jokes was a man who wanted to be seen, not just watched. He hid his vulnerability behind laughter, guitars, and noise, but every solo betrayed it, that yearning to matter, to last. His unpredictability was both his armor and his curse. When he played, he was untouchable. When the lights went down, he was human again, flawed, searching, and beautifully so. When Paul called him irreplaceable rock soldier after his death, it wasn't just tribute, it was reconciliation. In death, Ace Frehley became more than the rebel who fell. He became the brother who made their dream possible, and the echo that will forever hum beneath Kessus's thunder. He was the chaos that gave their order meaning, the wild star that burned too fast, but lit the sky just long enough for everyone to look up. Yes, before the arenas, before the fireworks, before the makeup became myth, there were just two young men with guitars trying to make something of themselves. The rise of Paul and Ace in the early 70s, New York was not the city of dreams it pretended to be. The clubs were rough, the nights long, and every musician was chasing the same impossible thing, a sound that would get them out. Paul Stanley, born Stanley Eisen, grew up in Queens feeling like an outsider. He'd been born with a deformed ear, partially deaf on one side, and as a kid, he learned early how cruel people could be. But that same pain made him sharp. It gave him drive, hunger, and a sense that music might be his escape. He didn't just want to be heard, he wanted to be seen. Every time he looked in the mirror, he imagined a version of himself that the world couldn't laugh at. That's who Paul Stanley became, the performer, the showman, the Starchild. Ace Frehley, on the other hand, was chaos wrapped in charm. A Bronx kid with a mischievous grin, he was as unpolished as he was talented. Ace didn't think about fame or business, he just wanted to play. He was the kind of guy who'd plug in his guitar, crank the amp until it screamed, and grin like a kid who'd just gotten away with something. His humor, his unpredictability, his swagger, it all felt effortless. While Paul worked through discipline, Ace lived through instinct. When Ace auditioned for Paul and Gene Simmons in 1973, legend says he walked into the room wearing one orange sneaker and one red. He plugged in, ripped through a solo, and didn't say much. The other guys exchanged looks. They knew. Ace wasn't just another guitarist. He had something raw, magnetic, almost dangerous. That was the moment Kessus began to take shape, not just as a band, but as a chemistry experiment that would redefine rock. The early years were brutal. They could barely afford rent, lugging their gear across freezing streets to play half-empty clubs. But what they lacked in comfort, they made up for in conviction. Paul was the visionary, mapping out stage concepts, harmonies, and wardrobe ideas. Ace brought the spark, the spontaneity that made their sound unpredictable and alive. Together, they struck a balance. Paul built the framework, and Ace set it on fire. Their bond at first was simple music and mischief. They were brothers in ambition, hungry to make their mark. Paul once said that in those early years, he and Ace would finish a show, grab a drink, and laugh about the chaos of it all. There was no ego then, no talk of money or ownership, just the shared thrill of being young and loud in a world that didn't expect them to survive. As Kes evolved, so did their dynamic. Paul was always the perfectionist. He cared about every note, every costume detail, every lyric. Ace was the opposite. He thrived on imperfection. He'd hit the wrong note and make it sound right. Fans loved him for that unpredictability, that flash of danger that made Kiss shows electric. Paul admired it too, even if he wouldn't always admit it. Deep down, he knew Ace brought something to the stage no one could manufacture: soul. By 1975, Kes had exploded. Alive turned them from struggling dreamers into global icons. Kids wore their makeup, mimicked their struts, and dreamed of guitars that shot smoke and fire. But with fame came fractures. Paul, always cautious, began to sense that Ace was drifting. The late nights became longer, the partying harder. While Paul saw the band as a disciplined craft, Ace saw it as a lifestyle. The tension that would one day tear them apart began quietly, like cracks under fresh paint. Still, on stage, they were unstoppable. Watch footage of Detroit Rock City from those years and you can see it. The unspoken dialogue between Paul and Ace. Paul commands the crowd, feeding them every ounce of showmanship, while Ace steps into the spotlight, guitar screaming, turning chaos into art. They were yin and yang, control and chaos, order and fire. Without Ace, Paul's precision might have felt cold. Without Paul, Ace's brilliance might have burned too fast. Together, they made magic. Offstage, though, it wasn't always laughter. Paul was business-minded, Ace wasn't. Decisions about royalties, songwriting credits, and creative direction began to spark resentment. Ace felt boxed in, his ideas dismissed. Paul felt frustrated that Ace didn't take the band as seriously as he did. It was like trying to steer a car when the other guy kept pulling the wheel toward the cliff. Paul once said in an interview, But when Ace was on, when he was really there, it was pure electricity. Despite the tension, there were moments of brotherhood that fans never saw. Late nights after shows, sitting backstage in silence, just sharing the quiet relief of surviving another night. Times when Paul would cover for Ace during his rougher days, or when Ace would crack a joke to cut the tension in a meeting. They fought, yes, but they also understood each other in ways no one else could. Both of them had something to prove. Both of them had spent their lives fighting to be seen. In those years, the makeup became both mask and mirror. The Starchild and the Spaceman, two personas built to survive the chaos of fame. Paul's face paint with its single black star was his way of owning the part of himself the world once mocked. Ace's silver lightning design was pure escape, a reflection of the dreamer he was. When they took the stage, they weren't just playing music, they were transforming pain into spectacle. That shared understanding, that shared escape, was what made their connection so profound. As the 70s rolled on, their differences grew sharper, but so did their respect. Paul knew Ace had a natural genius. His riffs were melodic but heavy, his solos structured yet wild. Ace, in turn, knew that Paul was the backbone, the one who made sure the music actually got recorded, the shows got booked, the machine kept running. Even when they clashed, there was an underlying admiration neither of them could quite put into words. It's easy now to remember the fights, the falling outs, the interviews filled with bitterness. But in those early years, before the world knew their names, there was something sacred about what they built together. Two kids from different boroughs, different worlds, united by sound and dream. They made each other better, even when they made each other miserable. Looking back, Paul once said, "We were all trying to find ourselves under that makeup." The irony is, maybe that's when we were most ourselves. That was the strange beauty of their partnership. It was both volatile and vital. Ace brought the wildness that gave Kessis its heartbeat. Paul brought the focus that kept that heart beating. Together, they created something neither could have done alone. When you peel away the glitter and spectacle, their story was never really about fame. Kessis was more than a band, it was an empire built on spectacle, reinvention, and endurance. Four young dreamers from New York, Paul Stanley, Starchild, Gene Simmons Demon, Ace Frehley, Spaceman, and Peter Criss Catman, transformed rock and roll into mythology, then life characters who inspired generations. Their music bridged raw hard rock with theatricality, influencing artists from Metallica to Lady Gaga. Yet, behind the roaring stages and blinding lights, a deeper narrative unfolded, a search for identity, validation, and belonging that, for a few shining years, they found in each other's music. However, even the strongest bonds can fray. By the late 70s, as Kessis reached imperial status, fame amplified not only their success but also the cracks forming within the group. Paul Stanley, the perfectionist, viewed every show as a mission, ensuring tight chords, exact harmonies, and audience satisfaction. Ace Frehley, in contrast, sought freedom on stage, a space where rules didn't apply. This delicate balance between Paul's discipline and Ace's began to collapse around 1978. The band's relentless pace of albums, tours, and media appearances transformed their hard-won fame into a prison of expectation. Each member retreated into their own world, with Ace increasingly lost in a blur of late nights and excess. Substances that once loosened him up before shows began to take control, leading to tardiness or absences. His humor sharpened, his laughter quieted, much to Paul's infuriation. Paul, whose career was built on control, expressed a restrained disappointment, acknowledging his love for Ace but lamenting, "You can't build a rocket ship when one of the engines doesn't want to fire." Backstage, tensions escalated. Paul and Gene Simmons pushed for tighter, cleaner, and more elaborate productions, while Ace argued that Kessis was losing its soul. "I didn't want to be a puppet," Ace later stated in his autobiography No Regrets. "I wanted to play rock and roll, loud, messy, real, but it felt like everything was about money, control, image. It wasn't fun anymore." Their arguments weren't explosive but cold, quiet, and dangerous as resentment simmered. During the recording of Dynasty 1979, the band rarely played together. Ace's guitar parts were often recorded separately, and Paul and Gene would rewrite songs behind his back, dismissing or diluting Ace's material. Ace felt a growing distrust, as if he was just there to wear the makeup. Conversely, saw a man choosing to drift away, stating, "We were killing ourselves to keep the ship from sinking. Talent doesn't mean much if you're not there to use it." The final years before Ace's departure were marked by silence rather than shouting. Meetings became monologues, sessions ended early, and tour buses felt like cold, moving tombs. The men who once shared dreams in small New York clubs could barely look each other in the eye. In a poignant 1982 interview about Ace's absence, Paul remarked, "Sometimes you reach a point where words don't fix things anymore. You just keep playing and hope the music can say what you can't." But even the music couldn't bridge the gap. Ace's official departure from Kessis in 1982 was not a bang but an exhaustion. He cited needing break, but those close to him knew it was goodbye. Beneath the resentment, there was grief. Paul later admitted Ace's departure left an irreplaceable hole. He was unpredictable, Paul said, but when he was good, he was brilliant. There was something in his playing that I could never replace. Kessis continued with new members, tours, and masks, but an essential element, the strange magic of their clashing personalities, was gone. Though they would reunite decades later, the scars never fully healed. It's haunting to consider what might have been if the original four had found peace earlier, if fame hadn't magnified their flaws, or if pressure hadn't buried their friendship under expectation. Paul reflected in 2014, "The tragedy isn't that we fought. The tragedy is that we stopped talking. We forgot we were just four guys trying to make people feel something." For all the fire and spectacle, what truly lingered was not the explosions on stage, but the echoes of what was lost when the music stopped. Their songs, Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City, I Was Made for Lovin' You, became anthems that refused to age. Beyond the music, Kessis built a brand unlike anything before, from comic books and action figures to farewell tours that never seemed to end. But beneath the fire and makeup was something deeper, a story about ambition, brotherhood, ego, and survival. Decades after their debut, Kessis remains a symbol of both the glory and the price of chasing immortality. Their legend isn't just about fame or money, it's about the unrelenting power of rock to make people believe in something bigger than themselves. May Ace's soul rest in peace. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to stay updated on more stories that dive deep into rock history.